Behold another episode of the Gaming Memories Podcast. You know the drill. It is I, your host, the prophet, he who hath been anointed by the gaming gods themselves, even Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost, who appeared to me in vision, commanding I create the one true gaming podcast simply by interviewing creative and interesting people about their favorite gaming memories growing up. And today, I am doing just that. My creative and interesting guest is, drum roll, please, Matthew Stormageddon, aka DJ Stormageddon, aka Matthew Storm, is the host of two gaming podcasts for your consumption. Number one is the, quote, Fun and Games podcast, which is self-described as Geoff Moon and Matt Storm chat about their love of games, the evolution of gaming as an artistic medium, as well as sometimes bring on guests from within or outside the industry to chat about gaming. Matt Storm also produces the miniseries called Side Quests. Every episode is a different host, talking about a game they love and why they love it. Number two, the Reignite podcast, which is self-described as Movie Voice Enter, a podcast by two friends who love storytelling, video games, and romance. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Reignite is a podcast where Matt and Frankie play through a series, but this time their playthroughs will be more critical. Every choice will be made as close to their moral compass as possible, and they will discuss the choices they made and what meaning, knowledge, or wisdom they can pull from the game. Play along with them and share your experiences. I just want to say they started out with, I believe, Mass Effect, and the Mass Effect trilogy is badass. One of my favorite trilogies of all time, so you had me at Mass Effect. Anyway, that's it. Matthew Storm, DJ Stormageddon. All the applicable links will be in the podcast description for your clicking convenience. Otherwise, remember to share the good news of the gaming gospel, and ye shall be blessed. I say these things in the name of Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost. Amen, and enjoy the show. All right, Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon. Number one, where does Stormageddon, the name, come from? And number two, tell people about yourself, where they can find you, and what you do.
There are two parts to this question. Stormageddon, the name, most commonly popularized was by Doctor Who. In the Matt Smith season of Doctor Who, he meets a young man and their baby, and the baby has a name. I can't remember the actual name of the baby, but then the doctor goes at one point, well, I speak baby, and his name isn't that. His name is Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All. Because my actual last name is Storm. When I started DJing in and around the local New York theater scene and burlesque scene, the producer I worked with the most was a Doctor Who fan, and she decided, oh, your name's Stormageddon now. That I've just decided. And since then, I've been DJ Stormageddon as a professional DJ for, 15 years. And then I applied it to podcasting as well, and go by Matt, aka Stormageddon, on just about everything I do. That or Matt Storm, which is my actual legal name. And for the second question, which I guess is the third answer at this point, counting is fun. People can find me around the internet as a podcaster and a DJ. I've been podcasting for well over a decade. At one point had like 6 or 7 different podcasts of different productions and hosting, but now I'm only hosting 2 shows. A video game podcast called Fun and Games, which I host with the incredible Geoff Moonen, which is a broad topic-based podcast. We talk about console retrospectives, we interview developers, composers, we talk about genres, things in the gaming space that we see all the time. And then we have a sub-series in that feed called Side Quests, where different hosts every episode does a little 10 to 15-minute monologue about a game they love and why they love it. My other show is Reignite, started as a Mass Effect podcast, played through the trilogy, and then Andromeda as the lead characters and making decisions, me and my co-host, Mary Bradley Lestrange, as if we were Shepard, as if we were the character, and then like discussing why we made those choices, and more importantly, talking about which aliens we wanted to romance, because that's the fun part. We are currently now in our Dragon Age season, the second one. We moved from the natural pivot from Mass Effect to Dragon Age, and we're doing Dragon Age 2. And for the first time in the history of the show, we are current because there is a new Dragon Age, as of when we're recording, coming out in about a month, and so we get to do updates on that, though we are by no means a news show, but it's been fun to gush about a new game coming out while working through the old ones. Other than that, I'm just kind of a horny dork on the internet. I go by they, them pronouns, and I'm excited to be here.
Where do I start? Okay, first off, Mass Effect is the goddamn truth.
Yeah.
So let's start with Mass Effect. Did you like Andromeda?
So, fun fact about Andromeda, I'd never played it when it came out. And then when we were getting towards the end of the third game, my co-host recommended that we do Andromeda because they had played it. And I was like, okay. And so I played it for the first time for the podcast. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Separated from all the nonsense on the internet, I had a good time. Was it perfect? No. Were there flaws? Absolutely. But did I have fun? And were the aliens hot? You bet your ass.
Dude, it's not that bad.
No, it's absolutely
not that bad.
It's not.
Yeah.
People were overblown, and I can get why people were unhappy with it, especially pivoting away from Shepard. But yeah, being separated from the internet bullshit, it was very enjoyable to play. So me and my co-host play through the game, and every episode would be like a mission or two, and we'd bring a guest, and sometimes, or it would just be the two of us, and we'd discuss the choices we made, because we were playing the games as if we were Shepard and or Ryder, and trying to make decisions as close to as we would in real life. Now, obviously, no one's ever pointed a gun at me, thank God. So in those kinds of moments, we're kind of winging it. But like emotionally, we try and put ourselves in the shoes and make those choices. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And the natural branching point was Dragon Age once we finished Mass Effect, because we are huge fans of BioWare and games with a lot of choices.
Yeah, that's a fantastic format. I'm doing something similar with Chris from Retro Hangover, King of Games. A new podcast will be launching somewhat soon. We finished our first game. It's essentially, I call it the book club format. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a book club. You play a section of the game, you talk about it.
Yep.
We're adding in YouTube. We're going to make it like a YouTube series as well. But I think that is one of the funnest ways to play a game, because you're playing it with a different mindset, because you know you're going to hyper-analyze it. You go through it with a fine-tooth comb, right?
Yeah.
And you hyper-analyze it, and it makes the game it's a different experience, and I've been really, really enjoying it. And I got the inspiration to do that. Obviously, there's lots of podcasts like yours that do that, but there's a podcast called Retrograde Amnesia that does the same thing with JRPGs, and they did like 86 episodes on Xenogears for their first season,
right?
Which was just, I listened to all 86. I mean, that was like all I listened to for a long time. Like, this sounds like so much fun. And Mass Effect is one of those series that I haven't talked to Chris about it, but it is one of my absolute favorite series. I've played all 4 games when they came out, and then I played all 4 again when the remastered trilogy came out, and I replayed Andromeda just because I already just played the first 3. I'm like, I might as well play Andromeda again. Yeah, so without turning this into a massive Mass Effect only podcast,
which I could easily do, mind you.
I think we could easily do at this point. I'm going to have to go check that out. That sounds...
Please do. Really, I would love that. Yeah.
You said that's more of a general, you bring on guests, you cover news. Is it just winging it, like every week's a little bit different, or is there a schedule that we can follow?
So there's no official schedule, but Jeff and I plan out every episode. We pick a topic. And so there's no news. Funnily enough, most podcasts that are gaming related do a news segment and keep people up to date weekly. We put that behind our Patreon paywall because we never do it. Part of it was wanting to not have to worry about staying relevant and being evergreen. But what it comes down to is finding a topic within the gaming space that we want to cover. For example, if we can interview a developer who just released an indie game, we'll interview them about their game, and we'll make the whole episode about this indie dev, how they got started, talk about their game, talk about their gaming history. That's a very kind of focused thing. Another thing we've started doing that our patrons vote for is console retrospectives. We started with a retrospective on the GameCube and have since done the Game Boy. Game Boy Advance is coming out soon as when we're recording, the Xbox 360, and we'll just do life and death of this console, how we got into it, and we bring on a guest for that every time because we don't want it just to be the two of us rattling on about a console, especially some consoles we're less experienced with because me and Jeff haven't owned every single console, though I've owned a lot of them. And then beyond that, it's just like picking topics in the gaming space. Like we recently did an episode on grinding in video games. Like, what is grinding in video games? What's a good kind of grinding? Is there such a thing as a good kind of grinding? And then making our way through the different kinds, like grinding in World of Warcraft to get levels versus grinding in a Final Fantasy game to beat a boss, or, is playing Stardew Valley grinding because you're grinding through crops to make sure you get the special event to go to the next season or whatever. I'm talking about how it affects how we play games and how people might bounce off that. We've also done stuff on signposting in games. I had recently played Dragon's Dogma 2. I got a code for it from Capcom. Thank you, Capcom, and 47. Dragon's Dogma famously barely signposts anything. They kind of throw you into the world and go, have fun, figure it out. And we wanted to have this conversation. We brought some guests on to talk about, is that good? Is that bad? In the era of the Dark Souls games, they have very little signposting. You're meant to just kind of figure it out. And not whether it's good or bad per se, but when it's used effectively and like why people might bristle against some of that stuff. So it's that kind of thing. And then we also use it as an excuse to go to conventions. We recently covered PAX West 2024, which was a lot of fun, where Jeff and I get to play a bunch of indie games and do some live on the show floor interviews. We have a travel recording setup that we bring with us, and that's a lot of fun because we play some of the AAA games at conventions, but we go to those conventions to play all the indie games no one's ever heard of and give them kind of a voice. The ethos behind that podcast is, Jeff likes to say, every video game is somebody's favorite. You just won't know till you ask, right? This idea that gaming should be celebrated. We try and put a positive spin on gaming. Obviously, we don't ignore the layoffs and other things that have been happening that are terrible within the industry, but we try to put a positive spin on it. A lot of it is born out of all the negativity online, and so that's where SideQuest came from, the short form series. So that is a different host. Like, for example, Cade, you would come on and talk about the first Final Fantasy. I'm just throwing something out there based on your shirt. And you would just for 15 minutes talk about why you love this game. You don't have to tell me why it's good. I don't care. I want to know why you love it, how you found it, how you got into it. And then then I edit it, produce it, and put it out. And we've done a ton of different episodes. We have repeat hosts. Dave Jackson has done something like 6 episodes and is always messaging me, hey, Matt, I need a forum to talk about this game. Can I do a side quest? And that's the whole point, right? But we've also had game developers, people who listen to our podcast who have no podcasting experience, send me a voice memo from their phone, and I edit it and put it out. Like, it's a way to grow the voice of gamers who want to celebrate games and just like lean into the positivity and enjoy it. And so like that's where the whole show came from. And so when we're planning for it, we use that as part of the ethos when we're interacting, when we're promoting, when all of that stuff. And so it's been a fun experience, and Jeff and I have known each other for quite some time and are very close. And so we often align on a lot of stuff. And when we don't, we talk about it. But for the most part, it's just a celebration of video games on the whole.
I'm going to be stealing that for sure.
It's stark, like, because also SideQuest is born out of that ethos too. Like, I hated Fortnite like everybody did because I didn't know anything about it. And then like our 6th episode or 8th episode, I remember really early on, my friend Nate came on and they did an episode about Fortnite and why they love it. It talked about the camaraderie, playing with their friends, goofing off, not caring about winning, having cool skins. And I was like, oh, that does sound fun. And then I tried Fortnite and I liked it. Who knew? Like, it's that idea that you never know what someone loves and they might convince you to love it too. Or even if you don't, they can give you a convincing pitch for why they do. And you can kind of get wrapped up in that enthusiasm, which is the whole point.
That concept, that idea of let's just focus on the positivity, I'm 100% aligned with. So you're still actively DJing. Are you producing music? Is there music we can find online?
So no, I'm not a producer. I just mix. I mostly do live events, like private events, weddings, that kind of thing. I've wanted to make music, but and so the closest I've gotten to making music is when Fuser still had life left in it, which was Harmonix's most recent game before getting acquired by Epic. It's a DJ game with no peripherals where you can mix songs on the fly. I used to stream it all the time. I was a featured streamer for it for many years. That's the closest I've come to making music. I would make my own remixes in that. You could export them. You could share videos on them. If folks go to my TikTok, DJ_Stormageddon, you can find a bunch of my mixes there, which are a lot of fun. I've been meaning to get back to it because now the mod community, now that it's dead for like live service stuff, like new songs, the modders got a hold of it, and now you can put any song in it, and the system knows how to separate out the tracks, like the different instruments. And so I need to do more of that. But yeah, it's mostly live events. I did a wedding a few weeks ago where friends of mine did like an old school schlocky, like horror themed wedding, like think Bela Lugosi, like old school horror. And I DJ'd as Phantom of the Paradise. People can see the helmet right above me there, above my shepherd helmet. It's that kind of stuff. And I used to DJ burlesque shows back in the day before the pandemic, which was a lot of fun. Usually themed shows. Like I did a Scott Pilgrim show that I got to put together where all the acts were Scott Pilgrim themed, things like that. And I like putting together themed playlists, either based on a franchise or based on a feeling or whatever. And it comes from growing up listening to a ton of music and being very nerdy and open to different kinds of music. I've done some minor audio production, like I've helped folks produce tracks for an album or for like a burlesque act or something, but it's all minor stuff, not anything you can find online, like small scale. It's mostly working DJ, like gig kind of DJ I've been doing for a long time.
You said you brought on or have brought on indie game developers and give them a voice.
Yeah.
If you could recommend one episode, your favorite interview and favorite indie game that you've had on, I know it's going to be hard to pick a baby, but Let's choose one of your children for me and for the listeners. I would love to know, because I don't do any major games on my content. It's only retro emulation and indie for a similar reason. There's already so much content out there talking about the biggest games. I want to focus on indie and retro. So usually guests will come on and show me indie games I've never heard of, and some of them are apps. Like Dave recently showed me this game. I think it's called 1000X.
1,000 Times Resist.
And I found it on Steam.
Yes.
It's overwhelmingly positive. I found a bunch of videos of people gushing about it. I bought it. As soon as I finish Final Fantasy 16, I'm going to play it. So give me a recommendation based on someone you've interviewed or a game for me and the listeners.
The episode I'd recommend is actually, as of when we're recording, one of our most recent episodes, which was our special on PAX West 2024, because there you're going to hear interviews about not one, but like 8 different indie game devs. Also, so those episodes are always 2 parts. Part 1 are me and Jeff, and in this case, 2 guests, talking about like our top 3 games we saw on the show floor and talking about the indie game we loved and giving our perspective. And then the whole back half of the episode is just a series of interviews with different devs. If I had to shout out one specific episode we did, episode 138, which is a little while back, we interviewed Dave Proctor about The Big Con, which was his studio's first game. They have since put out A Night in the Attic, which was a VR game, and they're working on All Systems Dance, which is a action platformer dance game where you don't fight robots, you dance to make them overheat and shut off.
I like that idea.
His games are always not non-combat, but non-violent. And so he came on. It's funny, we were connected through PR. I didn't know Dave from a hole in the wall. We recorded with him once, and now we're like good friends. He's just a sweetheart. The games he makes are great. He works for a studio called Mighty L. And so the episode, though, is about The Big Con. The Big Con is like, I think, old school like action adventure games where you're like exploring a space, talking to people, finding clues, solving puzzles. It's got this 90s Nickelodeon kind of neon vomit aesthetic. And then the narrative is really interesting. But the thing that hooked me is their credits, their credits theme and their like main theme for The Big Con is sang by Rockapella. That's right. Carmen Sandiego's Rockapella did the theme song for that game. And when we interviewed Dave, it's the first question I asked because I grew up in the 90s. I loved Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. And I was so hyped to just hear that story. And then from there, we spiral out to talk about the rest of the game and stuff. It's a delight. It's on Steam. It's on Switch. I think it's on all platforms now, actually. So The Big Con by Mighty L is a game I'd recommend. Also recommend you wishlist their latest game coming soon called All Systems Dance, which I got to demo at PAX West, and there's an interview with Dave in that PAX West episode I mentioned earlier about that game, which is coming early next year. We'll start there. There's tons of other stuff, but we can start there.
That's a great start. Now, you mentioned Carmen Sandiego, which I think is the first time that's ever been mentioned on this podcast, and I fucking love those games. I played so much Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. I think we were born at similar times. If you don't mind me asking, what year were you born?
83.
So you're 2 years older than me. Born and raised in New York?
Yes. So I was born in Brooklyn. I moved to Staten Island when I was 3, and then moved back to Brooklyn when I met my now spouse 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't know. Time's a lake. Somewhere around there.
Okay.
But I've always lived in New York. I've never lived elsewhere. I've traveled elsewhere, but I've never lived anywhere but New York.
And you've always been into gaming from the jump?
Yes. My first game
don't tell me. I'm going to guess. That's the point.
Oh, right.
That's
yes.
the point. Don't tell me.
Of course. I almost ruined your show.
No, the problem is 83. That puts you like probability right in between the NES and the 2600. Or then the other thing is it's always like the throw off is sometimes it's a handheld. Some people get a handheld first. So it's really not that hard to guess. You have 3 options. You look at the year, what the most popular console was for the time. Most people are getting a console between the 5 and 10 is their first console. 2600 was pretty poppin', but the NES was also pretty poppin', and you had the Game Boy, and then randomly someone will be like, I got a Game Gear as my first, like Dave, I got a Game Gear as my first console, and then I never had a Sega console for the rest of my life. Like so not normal. Totally threw me for a loop. I'm gonna go the 2600. Did you have a 2600?
I did.
Yes.
My first video game console was a 2600. My mother gave it to me. She bought it just for Pong because she loved Pong in the arcades, but then realized that she played it too much, and so she gave it to me. And so I got an Atari 2600 with Pong and the dial paddles. as well as a regular Atari controller, and Mousetrap, which most people are like, what the hell is Mousetrap? Mousetrap is discount bargain bin Pac-Man. Instead of ghosts and Pac-Man, it's mice, cheese, and cats. And I loved it. I loved that game as a kid. I tried to go back and play it as an adult. Oh, it's awful. It's so bad. It's worse than the Atari Pac-Man, I think, personally. And then I also had some weirdo games. Like I had the famous E.T. game. I had Superman on Atari, which is impossible. You have to I forget what you have to put together a telephone booth and then get in it to become Superman. And it was just very weird. And then over the years, I had many other games, Quest and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I had that for quite a few years before then begging my parents to get me an NES.
This sounds like you were pretty attached to video games, like you fell in love pretty quick.
Yes, I loved playing video games. I didn't always love games. There is a period later in my life where I fall out of them for a bit, but we'll get to that. Okay. But yeah, from a kid, like all through my young years, through my teen years into high school and early college, I loved video games, played them, wanted to get the latest thing, though often didn't. I got to most consoles pretty late. There were only a few midnight launches I went to. But yeah, always loved video games for as long as I can remember.
The reason I ask is sometimes people will have their first console. Yeah, my dad had a PC. I sort of played games, but it wasn't until game A, B, or C that blew my mind. And then I became a gamer, or I identified as being a very serious gamer. Did you feel from the 2600 immediately like I'm into games, or is it just something, a fun hobby that you had on the side?
So while I was a little kid, it was just a fun toy to play with, like anything else. I wouldn't say that I considered myself a gamer, with a Y, because, I like to be difficult. Gamer, get it? Anyway, thank you for laughing. The system that really turned me into a gamer was my third console? No, probably my fourth console, because I got a 2600 and an NES and then a Game Boy. And then when I got the SNES, the Square, the late gen one, that's when I think I became a gamer. And now, before I step on your toes in format, do you want to know the game that made me a gamer?
Yes, before we do that, so the reason I ask is we can sort of blitz through those first three consoles. Was there anything on the NES and the Game Boy that really stood out that maybe was a precursor to you becoming a gamer?
So yeah, I mean, I don't want to skip over the consoles because I did love them deeply. The NES was my first true love. I feel like that when I first played Super Mario Brothers 2, I was like, what character select? Weird world? It was all a dream? What is this? I was a Game Genie enthusiast also on the NES because those games were hard as heck. Some of my favorite games were actually the licensed stuff, thinking DuckTales, thinking Darkwing Duck. Those games were huge for me,
Tailspin?
Especially since Oh, and Tailspin, hell yeah. I loved the Disney Afternoon. I was right around that age, and so I loved those games. But then I also had the classics, the Mario games. My favorite NES game probably of all time is Kirby's Adventure, which I played before I got a Game Boy and played Kirby's Dream Land. So I went backwards. I was fascinated by the first Metroid and terrified by it because it was so creepy and ominous, and there was no dialogue, and I didn't know what I was doing in it. I'd say the weirdest game I've ever played on the NES was probably Mendel Palace. Now, Mendel Palace, for those who don't know, is by Game Freak. Yes, Pokemon's Game Freak. It was a slide tile kind of combat game. So how it worked is you would pick a character and you had to get through the Mendel Palace, and you would fight enemies by sliding the floor tiles and slamming them into walls. When you would slam into walls, they would shatter and die. And it was a whole, I don't know how many levels. But I loved this game as a kid. I couldn't even tell you why or what about it. The narrative, I don't even know it anymore, but I just loved this game. And when I went back to it recently on a totally legal way to play video games, I swear, Nintendo, that's when I saw it was by Game Freak and went, that can't be right. The same Game Freak? And lo and behold, yeah, it was one of the Pokemon developers' earliest video games.
It says, I hadn't heard of it, so I looked it up on YouTube. We'll put some footage of this on the YouTube version of the podcast. It looks a little bit like Kung Fu Heroes, I think it was called. So yeah, I'm looking at footage of it. This video says it was a Hudson Soft game, but did they publish it and then Game Freak developed it?
It's such a weird little game, but one of those games that like I couldn't even tell you where I got it or how I knew about it. I think a friend lent it to me. But yeah, I played tons of Nintendo games. I don't think I consider myself a gamer then or with the Game Boy because I was just playing them. They were toys. I wasn't like excited for the new releases. I got whatever I could. Like I got Mario 3 after it came out because I love the Mario games. But I don't know that I knew it had come out. I just like, oh, a Mario game. I want it. In the same way that like you kind of just play with a new action figure when you find it in the store or, you know, you get your parents to get you one. But like the Nintendo had a ton of stuff that I loved. And then, yeah, my Game Boy story is funny. I bought the Game Boy off a friend at school. They had one. I think they got the newest one. It must have been around when the Game Boy Pocket came out. He's like, yeah, I don't need my old Game Boy anymore. Do you want it? I'll sell it to you with Kirby for like $50. And that's a lot of money as a little kid. But I was like, yeah, sure. And so I got it and Kirby's Dream Land for like $50. Like now I look back fondly on the Game Boy. It's one of my favorite consoles. But at the time, again, I don't know that I consider myself a video game enthusiast in the way that I am now because I wasn't quite aware of like when things came out or, you know, I just bought whatever was cool.
So then we get to the SNES. Tell me, what is the game that converted you to the gaming gospel, the one true gospel?
The game that I'd say this is the first time I really realized games could be stories, games could be as interactive and interesting as movie and TV was Chrono Trigger, which is my favorite game of all time. I played Chrono Trigger for the first time. The best Final Fantasy game, I say to piss off everybody who likes Final Fantasy. I played Chrono Trigger because a friend of mine that I grew up with, my friend Roy, and I've told the story a few times, we both watched Dragon Ball Z together. We loved it. Loved Akira Toriyama. Rest in peace. I love Akira Toriyama's work. We loved Dragon Ball Z. We played the games. We watched the cartoon. And he was like, hey, you like Akira Toriyama? Have you played Chrono Trigger? And I was like, what's Chrono Trigger? And so he lent me his copy of Chrono Trigger. And I became obsessed. And that's also like I had played other RPGs around that time, but definitely didn't know what an RPG was. It wasn't until I played Chrono Trigger and experienced that story and went, oh, video games can do this. And that like kind of from the gameplay to the characters to the narrative to the music, obsessed to this day with that soundtrack. Fun fact, Chrono Trigger is a game that I own multiple copies of. I have the original Super Nintendo copy that a friend gifted me after I lost my original. I have the DS copy, which is my favorite copy to play. I have the PC version, which is better than it used to be. The only version I don't have is the worst.
PlayStation 1?
Yeah, the worst and cheapest version to buy is the only one I don't have. So I will get eventually. That game really, and I love, like, there's so many great games on the SNES. We've still not covered that on Funny Games yet as of this recording. It's one of my favorite consoles. But yeah, Chrono Trigger kind of opened my eyes to what more gaming I think could be beyond just a toy, a thing to just play with.
I like that you call it the best Final Fantasy because you could make the argument. I mean, Sakaguchi was involved.
Yep.
Then you have Yuji Horii, who's the Dragon Quest guy. It's like an all-star team.
Yeah.
But I mean, Sakaguchi did it. So you could just say, yeah, it's not Final Fantasy technically.
but it's basically
Final Fantasy in the bones of it.
It's funny. I've never played. So I've only played part of 6 on PC. I still need to finish it because I want to experience 6 because I know it's a lot of people's favorites. But the Kefka laugh to me, I went, oh, they recycled this laugh from Chrono Trigger when it is absolutely the other way around. The little jester in the funhouse is using Kefka's laugh. But I had no context for that. And it was early internet era. So I went, oh, they used the same thing that was in Chrono Trigger. Tell that story when you get to high school and everyone's like, you're an idiot. The other game came out first. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I love that game so much, man. Was lucky enough to guest on Retro Hangover for it when I found out that Chris and Shane were doing it. I was like, please, it's my favorite game.
I agree. Well, it's not my favorite game of all time.
Sure.
I would put it in depending on the day, if we're talking about JRPG specifically, it's going to be pretty high up there.
Sure.
What it is consistently for me, and I don't want to turn this into a music podcast because I'm a pretty big music head too. It is my number one soundtrack pretty consistently.
Yeah. It's one of the best video game soundtracks ever made. I like a lot of different video game soundtracks. Final Fantasy VII, of course. More recent release, Hi-Fi Rush, I think is an incredibly stellar video game soundtrack, even outside the needle drops. But there's something about Chrono Trigger that I think is just, to pull it out of my ass, scientifically proven to be the best soundtrack. And I'm sure mostly it's music theory-wise, we could probably prove it on some level, but like, it just is the perfect storm of composition and pace and style and storytelling. There's nothing like it in any other game. I'd say games like 6 and 4 in the Final Fantasy era get close. 7 also get very close, but I still don't think anything hits on the storytelling and the emotionality within the music like Chrono Trigger does.
Chrono Trigger, every track has a strong hook.
Yeah.
It's where it's like, okay, so one of my favorite songs of all time is Final Fantasy VIII's Blue Fields. It's
Sure.
the world theme. That's also a very popular Final Fantasy track just in general. If you go see the Final Fantasy Orchestra, they're going to play Blue Fields.
Yep.
Why? Because for some reason Blue Fields' hook and little melody and little progression gets stuck in your head.
Yep.
More so than, not to say the other songs in that game or other Final Fantasy games aren't good, they're just not quite as hooky, not quite as sticky.
Right.
Whereas Chrono Trigger's 90% of the tracks are like a number one pop song in terms of stickiness. They all just stick. And I hear 1-2 seconds of any Chrono Trigger track. I know exactly what track it is. I can sing the whole melody. I can hear the whole progression. Just something about that soundtrack is just special. And one thing I didn't know, I think I learned it on your episode with Retro Hangover when they talked about how they switched Uematsu last minute.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that ended up being a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just something about I don't know what deity or drugs they were doing or who they were communicating with or what special sauce came together for that soundtrack. But for some reason, that's just one of those soundtracks that is truly special.
Yeah.
Amongst other special soundtracks. It's the 1% of the 1%.
Yeah. I think you make a good point about how poppy it is. I mean, like, again, I talk about this in that episode of Retro Hangover. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized my favorite song in video game history, Magus's theme, is a bossa nova track, from the beat to the rhythm to all of it. Like, if it were turned into like actual instruments, it would be a bossa nova track. And in the same way that, like, no joke, Robo's theme is Never Gonna Give You Up, almost note for note. It's not exactly the same, but it's a pop hook. I think the fact that they lean so heavily into genre for those songs, whether intentionally or unintentionally, also makes them transcend, I think.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
It has to be.
I mean, I've been producing music forever. Like, everybody is referencing everybody.
Yeah.
That's how
absolutely.
music is made. That's how it's made.
Yeah.
That's how the cook is made. That's one of the reasons I really like Quentin Tarantino. Now we're going off into film. But one of the reasons I like Quentin Tarantino is he's very open about, hey, this sequence, I copied this shot sequence from this movie because I thought it was awesome. And then I took this shot sequence from this movie and I combined them. And that's how most creativity is done. There is some creativity that I could argue comes from the ether, like that truly original place.
Sure.
But the rest of it is people remixing things that they enjoy through the lens of their own taste. And by, like, if I were to make a video game, I think about this all the time, which I'll give you a hint. One of the last questions I'm going to ask is, if you get all the money in the world, what game would you make and you would develop it? So start thinking about that. I think about this question all the time and it changes. But it's always like, okay, I would take this aspect from here, this gameplay from there, this art style from there, and then I would tweak it this, right? That's what most creativity is. And I think that soundtrack it's someone who is genuinely, obviously, into music. That's why they're a composer. And they were obviously listening to American music and pop music. And they took more of that into their soup of influences than maybe a classical composition where a lot of other games. And that little extra flavor of pop is, I think, pop and popular music is why the songs are so sticky, so hooky. They just stick in your brain.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you can say the same for Koji Kondo. And it was proven when the Mario movie came out, because the Mario movie wasn't all his music, but it was mixed well with a ton of pop needle drops. Koji Kondo is like, the reason the songs in Super Mario World are so hooky and so catchy is because he's taking from pop music and from other things and from other traditional places and just making these standout tracks that will stay with you forever.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad Chrono Trigger is what brought you into the fold of identifying as a gamer or being a game enthusiast. Is there anything else on the Super Nintendo? So did you get into RPGs because of that?
Yes. So
play more?
So the Super Nintendo got me into RPGs. I wouldn't really understand what an RPG was until the PlayStation and Final Fantasy VII. But to me, Chrono Trigger was just a game that I loved. I didn't know what kind of game it was. I just knew that I loved it. But yeah, I love tons of stuff on the Super Nintendo. It's probably my second or third favorite console of all time. I mean, it's got Super Metroid, which is an all-timer. It's got Link to the Past, and I love I love all kinds of Zelda games, but the 2D Zeldas are where my heart lays. And so Link to the Past is one of my favorites there. But even the licensed stuff, like the Power Rangers game on the SNES was a blast. There's just so many. I love the Donkey Kong Country games, especially the first one. I like the second one and the third one, but I haven't replayed them as much. But the first one I used to play over and over again. I had a lot of Super Nintendo games. I regret that I didn't keep a lot of them. And the ones that I still have in my possession are just stuff I've rebought or been lucky enough to be gifted. But yeah, I loved the Super Nintendo. Played tons of games. I think the Super Nintendo is what taught me the diversity of my taste. And like that would continue to grow. It would really balloon with the PlayStation era and beyond. But like the Super Nintendo is when I first got a real taste of beat 'em ups versus platformers versus, and like all of the Mario games on, because they were all, I had the Super Mario All-Stars that included Super Mario World. So I had every Mario game on Super Nintendo and I played them all the time. Super Mario World remains one of my favorite 2D platformers of all time. I replayed it. Can't remember. We did a side quest episode. So I forgot to mention earlier, every 50 episodes, the milestone episodes of side quests, me and Jeff both go on the show and do a longer form version of it with a guest. And so it's 3 people. And so we've done it for Chrono Trigger. We've done it for Metroid Dread. And the most recent one we did, the most recent milestone we did, which was episode 300, we did with Brian Shea, formerly of Game Informer. We talked about Super Mario World. And I hadn't replayed it in probably a decade and blazed through it. Played it from start to finish, beat it, loved it. The rewind feature helps save time. But that said, on the Switch, it's still like the music, the graphics, all of it, just still on point. And so I think that's where my appreciation of pixel art for sure started with, for sure, the SNES.
What's the deepest cut, the hidden gem that you personally liked on the Super Nintendo you could recommend?
Good question. F-Zero is not a deep cut, but I feel like not enough people have played it, and I love F-Zero. Talk about great game soundtracks. F-Zero always has banging
Windy
jams.
City gets me every time.
So good. But I'd say in the vein of more obscure games, I think that Clay Fighter, a lot of people hadn't played, but I loved 2D fighters, grew up playing Super Street Fighter. I don't know if I'm particularly good at fighting games. I try to be, but I like them. But Clay Fighter is one of those games where this is like, what the hell is this thing? But I loved it. I played it all the time. It was super weird. It's why when Clay Fighter 63 1/3 came out, I pre-ordered it, even though that game was terrible by comparison. Not that the original game was great, but I loved that game. It was such a weird fever dream of a fighting game, and it was claymation, which I was obsessed with as a kid, so that made me love it too.
I just saw a short today. It's not Super Nintendo, but it's Clay Fighter 63 1/3, something else. It was only a Blockbuster rental.
Director's cut. Yeah, there was a regular version, and then the director's cut, you could only get a Blockbuster, and that had, I believe, Boogeyman in it, or Boogerman, rather. And then Earthworm Jim, I think, was in every version, but it had, like, exclusive characters as well, and exclusive, like, colors and costumes.
It's like I guess the most rare physical N64 game, and they were showing a sealed copy of it.
Yep.
And there was only X amount ever printed, and super, super, super rare. I'm like, I had no idea that there was that version of Blockbuster only Clay Fighter. So yeah, I played a lot of Clay Fighter. I played Killer Instinct
on the
also
Super
Nintendo, because that's, with the Donkey Kong Country and the Clay Fighter, you started, and Mortal Kombat digitized graphics.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're going to use other methods, and then we're going to convert these assets into sprites, bring the colors down, make them fit what the technical limitations of the Super Nintendo. So Killer Instinct was one, Donkey Kong Country, your Mortal Kombats, your Clay Fighters. Those were, at the time, a graphic jump was, it's because it was not traditional pixel art, right? So you were just, whoa, this looks really cool. I've never seen anything like this. I remember those. But we're going to move into the PS1, which is my favorite console of all time. And it sounds like you had some good times on the PS1.
Yeah.
So next was the PS1. I got the PS1 like pretty early. I think it was within a year of launch. I remember playing Jumping Flash demo. Most specifically at Blockbuster, I played. Do you remember the early demo disc that had the Stingray and the T-Rex?
Yeah.
Where all you did was just move the camera around?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, from then I was sold. I was like, all right, let's go, baby. So on the PS1, what is the best gaming memory you have on the PS1? And then we'll work our way backwards.
Sure. So I will say that I got the PS1 and the N64 around the same time. The best game, I mean, I think to this day, one of my favorite PS1 games of all time is Final Fantasy VII. I would cheat and say Final Fantasy IX, but truly I didn't appreciate 9 until I played it on the Switch a few years ago. retroactively, it's probably one of my favorite PS1 games, but I didn't enjoy it at the time. But Final Fantasy VII, like I was alluding to earlier, was the game that made me take note, oh, this is what an RPG is. It's why I think, like a lot of people, I bounced off of 8 so hard, which I've tried to replay recently, and I think I have other issues with it as an adult, but I think because 8 was so different from 7, and I loved 7 so deeply. I mean, also, something you have to know about me is, in high school, I was an emo kid, dark clothes, black t-shirts, baggy Jinko jeans, loved heavy metal and emo. So a lead character who is troubled, a love story with a tragedy, like it just had me written all over it. So I think that's why Final Fantasy 7 is probably my favorite game on the console, because of just, it was like Chrono Trigger on that next level, right? Now I love Chrono Trigger more, I think, at this point, but like storytelling, presentation wise, as goofy as some of the presentation looks now, at the time I was like, they look like people, what the hell, this is wild, when truly they don't. They're very stylized and don't, but like at the time it was mind-blowing. The FMV cutscenes were, and like FMV cutscenes going into gameplay, like the motorcycle stuff, like
yes,
there was just nothing like that, and so it kind of just blew my mind.
Final Fantasy VII was a massive game for everyone at that time frame, and Chris always complains about this because it made people who were not into RPGs,
right.
And then they would retroactively judge older RPGs based on 7, and he has a whole rant, and he goes, and I can see where that's coming from. I did play a few RPGs prior to 7. The first RPG I ever owned myself was Beyond the Beyond, which was the first RPG on PlayStation 1. But like you, well, not kind of like you, I had friends that had Super Nintendos. So I would go to a friend's house and I would play a little bit of Chrono Trigger, play a little bit of Final Fantasy VI, American 2. And I enjoyed them, but they weren't mine. I couldn't sit down and just play through the whole game, right? I'd get a couple hours on a Saturday to try it out. And, oh, this is cool. I like these RPG games, but I don't have access to them. So I was excited for 7 is an understatement. Like I had it pre-ordered. Every piece of media leading up to that game I owned. The one and only time I've shoplifted was stealing a Final Fantasy VII poster out of a GamePro or Game Informer magazine. I was just beyond excited. I had come home from a trip with the family when it came, and I remember like literally overreacting and crying and begging my mom to take me to GameStop to pick up because it was out.
Yeah.
I've been waiting so long. She's like, we can get it tomorrow. I was like, no, we can't get it tomorrow.
I need it now.
It's out and I need it now. And she took and I got it, and me and my brother got it at the same time. So it's a massive experience. It is not, I think I would probably like 9 slightly more. I recently played 7, 8, and 9 a year and a half ago and did a episode with Chris. And I used to think 8 was my favorite, and then 9 and 7. That's what I would generally tell people. I like them all. I'm not saying any of them I don't like. It's just, but now in hindsight, I think I like them in order that they're in, 7, 8, and 9. I like 7 the most, 8 the second, 9. I like them all. Yeah. So it's changed as an adult, but 7's one of those games. It's just, it is what it is. It's legendary. We could talk about it forever. It's been talked about. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. It's brought up on the podcast all the time. Not to say that's a bad thing, but I think it shows the cultural relevance of that game. Yeah. That game was a nuclear bomb in the culture.
For sure. Yeah, totally. It's funny. When you talk about the games you've played throughout your life and the game consoles you've owned, you forget stuff, right? The milestones like PlayStation and Super Nintendo, but I forgot an important milestone, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up, but I did own a Sega Genesis also. Anyone who follows me anywhere on the internet knows I'm unreasonably obnoxious about the Sonic franchise. Love those games, love the music. And the Genesis is what spurred that on. It was basically my Sonic machine. Had other games on it for sure, but like Sonic 1, 2, and 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which is one of the best Sonic games ever made, full stop.
A lot of people think it is the best Sonic game.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I like some. I replayed Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 this year, and I do genuinely still love those games. They are flawed. But as far as 2D games go and music goes, for sure, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is probably unbeatable. But I had Sonic Spinball. I loved that game as well. And then I had a bunch of like the Genesis spin-offs of like Contra and Castlevania, which I loved and never realized. Like I had Contra on the Nintendo, but I was like, oh, Contra's on the Genesis. This is great. I never realized as a kid how rare that was, right? That Contra was only on Nintendo consoles up until that point, and then eventually spun off onto other consoles. The Vector Man series, which I hear nobody talk about. Love those games.
Yes.
Some of the funkiest music in video game history are on those cartridges.
Yeah, the Vector Man, I'm glad you brought, along with the Donkey Kong Country, the Killer Instinct, the Claymation, same graphic, that was their answer to Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think Vector Man's visuals they're different. Yeah. But in some ways, I like them more.
They're
like
trippy.
when Vector Man shoots, the light, he lights up, there's like lighting, it's awesome. I love those games. And funky music. I had a Genesis. I thought we were just going to skip over it because I didn't realize you had one.
Yeah.
But you talk about funky music. Toe Jam and Earl.
Oh, my God. Toe Jam and Earl 1 and 2 are some of the best video games I've ever played. Especially the sequel because it was so cartoony and like Saturday morning cartoon. Talk about a game I played a lot with Game Genie because it was hard. But yeah, and also Streets of Rage. I mean, I talked about this with Chris in plenty of places, but Streets of Rage 2 is one of the best video game soundtracks ever because it doesn't sound like anything else. It sounds so unique. The style of that music, the clubbed sound of it with what the Genesis, like people like to rag on the Genesis chip because it was so limited, but that limitation made these games like Panic on Funkatron sound so good. The groovy tunes that they made for both of those games, but especially the second one, were just so unique because they had to work within those limitations. And some of the Genesis soundtracks I think are a big standout for me because I have such a strong nerdery for music. And they were so unique.
I think a lot of things we said about Chrono Trigger, you could say about Streets of Rage too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you're going to talk about all-time soundtracks, Chrono Trigger's up there, and then the next one you'll hear almost as much, if not more, Streets of Rage 2.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a pillar moment in gaming soundtrack history for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I played a lot of Genesis. Is there a deep cut from the Genesis you can think of that you enjoyed?
I mean, you mentioned the Toe Jam and Earl games. I didn't know a lot of other people who played them, but I loved them. I swore by them. Oh, I have one. Talking about fighting games, Eternal Champions.
Ooh.
Eternal Champions is a weird ass fighting game. It was Mortal Kombat before. It's like there's this alternate reality where Eternal Champions became the long running franchise because they had death kill moves. They had weird sprites and spooky music and unique backgrounds. But for whatever reason, Mortal Kombat took off instead. I mean, not for whatever reason. Mortal Kombat was incredible, but like there could have been a world where Eternal Champions was that franchise. I loved that game, and it was so weird and like had a weird story and like had kill moves where you could knock your opponents into like a fan in the background or like all these different things. And I remember obsessing over it at a time when like there was no online play. I could only play with my friends, right? I wonder what a world where Eternal Champions had online play looked like. Like it's just because I've never heard hide nor hair about that game since. It was definitely an underrated game at the time. And nobody talks about it now.
And I think there's a Sega CD version.
Yeah.
I've gone down the Eternal Champions rabbit hole because I liked that game. The Sega CD version I think is the best if you're going to try to go back and play that game or emulate it. There's a specific kill move in front of a movie theater.
Yeah.
Where you can defeat the character instead of you killing them. The teller from the movie theater gets out of the teller box and pulls out a machine gun and just blasts the person to death. It's not even you. It's like, whoa, we're gonna do a kill move where it's not even you. The 16-year-old kid taking tickets is just gonna pull out a Tommy gun and blast. I think that's a good deep cut for the Genesis. There's so many more. Let's head back to the PS1 64 era. That's probably that era of gaming is where I'm the most knowledgeable off the top of my head.
Same.
Let's just kind of go both systems. What are the standout games and memories you have from that generation?
So I talk about this a little bit on my side quest about Super Mario 64, and I've guested on a few podcasts talking about that game. But the reason that I said the SNES was my when I felt like I was a gamer was because the N64 was the first console I was aware of having a release date coming out. Came out around when I was bar mitzvahed. And I remember saying for my parents, my birthday's in October, so I must have gotten bar mitzvahed in October, and I think it came out in November of that year or something. It's around that time. And I told my parents, I don't want anything from you guys for my bar mitzvah except a Nintendo 64 and Super Mario 64. That's all I want. And of course, we didn't pre-order one because pre-orders were still a new thing. And so I couldn't get one when they first came out. I waited and waited. And so on a whim, I had my dad take me to Toys R Us. And back then, Toys R Us mostly kept all of their games in a back room. You would grab tickets off the wall and then hand it to this guy and he would go get the game for you. And I remember going up to this counter. This guy had a mustache. He was tall. Could have been 30. Could have been 60. No idea. I was a little kid. But But I asked him, do you have any N64s in stock? And he's like, I don't know. Let me go check. And went in the back. And he's like, yeah, I found one. Do you want Mario 64? He said yes. And then went home with one. My co-host Jeff likes to say that's some other kid's villain origin story. Like I took some poor kid's pre-order and that I was their villain origin story. But yeah, the N64 I was obsessed with from the moment I got it. Standout game. It's hard to beat Super Mario 64. Some people on some podcasts might agree that it might be the best game that came out that year. And I am inclined to agree. To this day, I think Super Mario 64 is one of my favorite games of all time because it just blew my mind what it could do. I will agree that it's not as fun to play without an N64 controller because it's designed for that controller. I played so many. I had the Clay Fighter game we were talking about earlier. I had so many games on this console. I had like all the Nintendo hits on there. Kirby 64. I had all of those games. If we want to talk about an obscure game, this is a game that I shout from the hills because it has the best title screen music in the history of video games, and that's Buck Bumble for the N64. It's a Ubisoft game, Argonaut Studios game. I believe it was co-developed or one of them published it. Buck Bumble has this title screen music that's just kind of like this bumpin' hip hop track that is incredibly catchy. You want to talk about hooks? And I was obsessed with this game. Not only the music, but it's this kind of like air combat game, but you're a cyborg bumblebee taking on evil bugs in the garden. And you have like rocket launchers and missiles and different guns, and it's just ridiculous. And I love this game. It's to this day, I think, one of my favorite underrated games ever. And when Argonaut Studios recently announced their reformation and they're putting out a remaster of Croc, I went, we might get a new Buck Bumble or like a remaster of Buck Bumble, which I would love that. But I loved the N64. I think to this day, it's still one of my favorite consoles because it was so quirky and weird. GoldenEye, I've guested on podcasts talking about GoldenEye. GoldenEye is what got me into the shooter genre and also made me fall in love with Grant Kirkhope, previous guest of our podcast, the incredible composer who's worked on so many, many things. But I first took note of his music on GoldenEye. And some of my favorite 4-player memories, like local co-op, I miss it so much. And the N64 pervade so many memories I have of local co-op, split screen, just playing a game together.
I have never heard of Buck Bumble. When I looked it up, I'm like, oh, I do remember seeing that case, like at a Blockbuster, right? So I do remember seeing that case. This is a great deep cut. I'm watching gameplay footage of it. It's one of the first comments was, this is the N64's response to Spyro.
Basically, but this was more air combat than Spyro was.
Yeah, this is more like all in the air. It looks really good. I would love to see what I can do with this on an emulator and spruce it up. It looks pretty awesome. I'll check out the title screen music.
Please do.
And then you brought up GoldenEye. We're back on the music thing of legendary music. Hit the pause screen.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Music on GoldenEye. That might also be in the Mount Rushmore of video game music.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how many social media posts where someone's talking about that pause screen music that has just millions and millions of views. Someone redoing it on a xylophone or someone playing it on a guitar.
Yeah.
Like that. That gets shared around. It's universal. Yeah. Everybody loves that music.
Yeah, Grant Kirkhope is known, I think, more vocally for the Banjo-Kazooie stuff because Banjo-Kazooie is a huge hit. But the work he did on GoldenEye, I think, is some of my favorite because, like you said, that pause screen music is he took the Bond theme and made it this funky chillwave track at a time when chillwave probably still existed, but was not super in the mainstream for sure. And then we get this track, and has gone on to do, of course, the Mario and Rabbids games, all sorts of incredible video games. He did Perfect Dark, but that I think in the episode we ask about the pause music. We must have. I feel like it would have been a missed opportunity if we didn't. But if you want to hear an incredible chat about incredible music, our interview with Grant Kirkhope was a delight.
Anything? Let's move over to the PS1. What sticks out to you on the PS1?
So besides Final Fantasy VII, I think that for me the PS1 platformers. It's funny. The PS2, when we get to it, I didn't play a lot of those platformers that people cherish. But on the PS1, I loved Crash Bandicoot. I loved the first Spyro game. I had Jumping Flash. I can almost guarantee I had Jumping Flash. I had Bubby's 3D. I didn't know any better. It's an awful game, but I had it. Because I grew up on we forgot to mention, but the Genesis, the Bubsy games, awful. But I had them, played them all the time. they weren't that bad when you had Game Genie. So I experienced the best version of those games, I suppose. I was really into wrestling at that time. So like the PlayStation 1 wrestling games were great. I loved those. They had creator wrestlers and career modes and all that stuff. And I loved doing that. And I also loved sports games at that time too. Like whatever NFL Blitz was out at that time, I played the hell out of. Some of the NBA games that were out at that time I loved too. As much as I love 7, 8, and 9 now retrospectively, I think the RPG I have the fondest memories of because I played it through with one of my best friends was Xenogears. A game that for years I didn't know was like the Xenosaga games and all of that were part of the same quote unquote universe, and that the Xenoblade Chronicles games are also like it's all the same team. I didn't know that for a long time until very recently, but like I loved Xenogears. It was just this cool mix of mech combat and regular RPG mechanics, and I was just like kind of blown away by it. And talk about awesome sprite art, like it's such a beautiful game. It's a shame that game didn't get the finish that it deserved, like that it was rushed out the door, but like that's another PlayStation game that I think not enough people have played or talk about. RPG fans I think shout about it all the time, but I think like the average player probably hasn't touched that game, and I think it's one of the best RPGs, even though it feels kind of rushed and incomplete. I think it's still a pretty strong entry in the pantheon of RPGs.
Dave Jackson made a good point. His episode will be out by the time this comes out. He brought up Xenogears. We talked about the rushed ending, and he said he liked it. It was actually good because, in his opinion, the strongest aspects of that game are the story, the lore, and the music.
Yes.
And that the gameplay gets a little repetitive. And so he enjoyed the second half of the game. Just give me the stuff I want, which is the story and the music. And he thought that ended up being a good thing. And I thought about that because it's so universally panned as, oh, it's such a shame that game was rushed.
Right.
But after the episode, I started thinking about it. Aside from the sprite work and the battle system, which I did enjoy, but he made a good point. He's like, dude, I got so sick of doing, what are they called? Killer blows or death blows?
Yeah.
By the end of the game.
Blows, maybe?
I think they're called death blows. And I'm like, dude, he's got a really good point, because when I think back to that game, what makes it legendary is not the gameplay. It's everything else. And the fact that the second half of the game, or the second disc, it's not second half, excuse me, the second disc is basically a visual novel.
Yeah.
Up until the last couple battles. He said it made the game better, and that they could have trimmed the game down more based on that, and it probably would have been a tighter experience. And the more I thought about it, I know it's sort of blasphemy to say, but I think he's got a super valid point.
No, I would agree. I mean, also as a fan of visual novels, I love that part of it. Like, I don't mind that, because if the story is engaging, then I don't, like, I agree. I mean, I'm replaying an RPG for the story, not for the mechanics. I might be replaying it for the mechanics, like Super Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, but like, if I'm replaying certain RPGs that maybe I don't love, like if I ever replayed Chained Echoes, which is a more modern game, I loved the story in that game, but I brushed up against a lot of the mechanics. But the story was incredible, and I would probably replay it at some point down the line because it was so well made. But it would be for the story, not for the mechanics. It's not always the case, but I feel like with a lot of good RPGs, it can be the thing that pulls you through.
I need to play that game. I played Sea of Stars.
Oh, love that game.
On stream, and people kept saying you need to try out Chained Echoes. And it's definitely on my list. I'm the same way. Like I replayed 7, 8, and 9, like I mentioned earlier, but I replayed them either the PC. Well, I played all of them, the PC re-releases with a bunch of mods. And one of the things I like doing, either via emulation or PC mods, is speed boosts if it doesn't come with it. Like a lot of the older RPGs that are re-released on the Switch, they'll come with a 2x, 4x, 6x speed boost because they know that, hey, it's not fun, speaking of grinding, to sit and grind all the time. But what I do enjoy is I don't mind throwing on a podcast, turning on a game to 8x speed and grinding out some levels.
Oh yeah, same.
I actually really enjoy that experience.
Yeah, it depends on the game for me, but like I recently did that with Final Fantasy IV when I played the Pixel Remaster on Switch. I played it for the first time, and I did that on the Moon because the Moon frickin' sucks. It's so hard. It's funny talking about the PlayStation and the games that are on it. It's easy to forget. Like, so obviously I may have as people follow my Twitter, I recently replayed or tried to replay Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, which didn't really age as well as I had wished it did. Also, recently replayed Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which, like, the more I listen to that soundtrack, I go, oh, this is the reason I like punk music. Like, there's a lot of great stuff on there, but, like, I wouldn't have known who Goldfinger was till much later if I didn't hear Superman on that soundtrack. But, like, the PlayStation, I think, has a lot of really good soundtracks. I think about Parappa the Rapper, which I can sing a lot of those songs by heart, and Mega Man Legends. Mega Man Legends is such a unique beast. Like, I love that game. It might be one of my
Legends
favorite.
1 and 2 are on my Mount Rushmore of all-time games. I love them.
Like, I think Mega Man X I like more just because I can blaze through it so fast, and the music shreds in Mega Man X. We didn't even talk about that in the Super Nintendo section, but, like, Mega Man Legends is such a unique game that we'll never get again. Like, we got the sequel and the Trombone game, which are also both good in their own right, but Mega Man Legends was such a unique animal, and, like, some of the best music, non-poppy music, like just kind of vibes music and battle music in the history of the franchise, and one of the coolest worlds, because it's such a unique world compared to all the other Mega Man games. Yeah, the PlayStation had some real great stuff. It's where I fell in love further with Street Fighter Alpha 3, where I first played Resident Evil, badly and not for very long, because it terrified me, but I tried Resident Evil 2. I rented that. I think I played the first section of the PlayStation and said, nope, we got to take it back to Blockbuster. I can't play this. Too scary. I feel like the PlayStation library is just much more unique when looking compared to other even PlayStation libraries in the later gens.
100%.
It's just very eclectic and weird and like all over the place in the best way.
I think the PlayStation 1 hit this weird balance where games were definitely cheaper to make, even including pricing in for inflation.
Sure.
Games were much cheaper to make, much cheaper to distribute. The PlayStation was one of the first consoles to, I don't want to say support third-party developers, but like really embrace at a new level, bringing on third-party developers. So the PlayStation library, the North American library, 4,000 just in North America.
Yeah.
4,000.
It's insane.
So it was just this weird, not weird, it was just like perfect balance time where it was cheap enough where people could take risks and make weird games. Like you could make LSD Dream Emulator.
Yep.
You could make Koldeka. You could make these, really weird games, and then you would still have your Final Fantasy VIIs, your Gran Turismos, and your big games and your first party titles and everything in between. You had lots of games like in various genres doing sometimes successful, but many times unsuccessful twists to the formula. Like, for example, I brought up Kodelka, which Bill Barber from the Barberhood Games showed me that game. Shout out to him. That's a survival horror JRPG.
Yeah.
Might be one of the only games that is that mix.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say it's an amazing game. You should go play it. It's like a must play. But if you're a music head, right? Music heads enjoy interesting mixes of genres that maybe the mainstream wouldn't enjoy. If you're a video game head, I feel the same way. Even though I don't think that game is a must play, I really enjoy it because it's doing things in an interesting, even though it's flawed, it's doing things interesting that I've never seen before, and I appreciate the risks that were taken, and that happened a lot on the PlayStation. And then if you add in the Japanese library, which is probably another 2,000 or 3,000 titles, and there's so many good PS1 fan translations. I've been working on a video compiling all the fan translations, and I think there's I found 78 so far games that have been translated by fans for the PlayStation 1. It's just balance of where they were cheap enough and distribution was available enough that people did a bunch of weird shit. And then once the PS2 came out and the PS3, I think it just got too expensive to start to take those risks.
I mean, I think also the thing about the PlayStation is it had so many genre-defying games. We talked about platformers and RPGs. And we haven't even talked about one of my favorite genres, Metroidvania. I mentioned Super Metroid before, but that combined with Castlevania Symphony of the Night is what made me a fan of the genre. And I played it during the PlayStation era. I wouldn't beat it until it was on Xbox Live Arcade. But Castlevania Symphony of the Night is the reason I like vampires. It's the reason I like Castlevania. On some levels, I'd say it's probably the reason I'm queer, because Alucard is very handsome. But that game, there was just something about it. Talk about a soundtrack. The soundtrack for Symphony of the Night is incredible. And I mean, the franchise chased that dragon. I would argue that most of the Game Boy Advance and DS games have a similar vibe, obviously,
they are
to Symphony of the Night.
Yes.
And I think similar composers, too. But, like, there's just something about that game and the cheesy voice acting and the what is a man, you know, all of that stuff. Like, I think that the PlayStation is so strong because, again, like it comes to, like, the reason I think I look at Soul Reaver so fondly is because there were no games like Soul Reaver before Soul Reaver. After that, we got so many kind of action vampire games later. I mean, I think about the Blood Rain franchise, which I love, which is until PlayStation 2. Like, a lot of these games define their genre. Silent Hill, Resident Evil, like, games existed before them, but they became pop culture icons on the PlayStation and on the N64. Like, that era created pop culture icons.
That's a really good point that I've never thought about. I think you nailed it. I've never heard anyone articulate it, but a lot of these genres, I wouldn't say were invented, but they were almost standardized during this era, would be the way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
There was survival horror before.
Yeah.
But Resident Evil created, like, the survival horror formula that we're still sort of using today.
Yeah, I mean, genres are stupid, to be frank, especially in music. Don't get me started. Like, genres don't make sense. They're often named poorly, but they persist because people want to categorize stuff. And I would say the same for video games. Metroidvania is a dumb name for genre. It's bad. You know, seek and search games, not much better, but, like, at least that tells you what the game is. Metroidvania doesn't tell you anything unless you've played a Metroid game and or a Castlevania game. Same with Souls games, right? Like, that means nothing to someone who hasn't played a Souls game. But a lot of these games are, like, ubiquitous in pop culture, which is why these kinds of names catch on. But yeah, I think that around this time is when not only we were articulating it, but the internet was coming into focus as, like, a thing that people used, and it'll really solidify in the years to come. But, like, cataloging things became very different also in a digital era and made it easier. And I think that also pivoted a lot of this stuff too. Man, who doesn't love Castlevania and hot vampires?
Yeah, he's one of the coolest characters
easily.
Ever. When Symphony of the Night came out, and again, weird little details that stick out to me. I'd love to make a video on this. Is the way his turnaround animation.
Yeah, the way he kind of floated on his heels.
He kind of floats backwards.
Incredible.
And then he turns around.
Yeah.
Just that tiny little thing. When you're playing a Metroidvania, which I agree, both in terms of music and gaming, labels, they're not bullshit, but they're just, like, impossible to get perfect.
Right.
But we also need them because you have to be able to communicate. I guess I like the term Metroidvania because Symphony of the Night was sort of the foundation that almost any modern indie Metroidvania, which I play almost all of them. Like, if it's a Metroidvania and it's pixel art on Steam, I just buy it. Maybe I'll get to it down the road. Maybe I'll play it. Maybe I won't. I just love the genre.
Right.
And it all came from that game. But when you play one of those games, when I was talking about his animation, you have to think your character looks cool because you're watching them the whole time.
Yeah.
And kind of like a good song, if you're going to be hearing, like, a battle theme in a JRPG, that battle theme better be good because you're going to hear it for 60 hours by the time you beat the game. Same thing with the Metroidvania. Like, I love... have you played Ender Lilies by chance?
I haven't, but I've heard of it. I'm familiar with it. I just haven't played it.
I love the concept. I love and I did beat it, but I had a hard time finishing it because I just didn't love the animation and the style of the main protagonist. And the game was good enough. I beat it regardless of the fact.
Right.
But when you play Symphony of the Night, I can watch Alucard run around and jump and transform into stuff, and I don't get sick of it.
Yeah.
There's something special that they nailed with that. Outside of all the other reasons that game is awesome.
Right.
There's lots of other reasons. But
the gameplay loop is important. I mean, what we talk about a lot on our podcast on Funny Games is, like, the reason Mario 64 is a good game is because it's a good game. But the reason I think people love coming back to it is because it's fun to run and jump. Regardless of all the other verbs you can do in Mario 64, the triple jump is so fun to do and so easy to do. Traversal is huge. I would argue that traversal is more important than combat in most games. It's why the modern Spider-Man games are so great. It's just so satisfying to swing around the city. Like, and they make it super easy. Are there tougher tricks and different things you can do? Sure, but the basic mechanics are great, and it's the same thing in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Traversing through that world as Alucard feels cool, looks cool, and is fun to do. Snappy, crunchy combat, like that's the kind of stuff, those basics make you able to build a game that's worth loving because you have them from the early moments. If you don't have them from the early moments, it's hard to sell the rest of it.
Absolutely. Agreed. Before we get to the Blitz questions, let's just do like, instead of console specific, before we get into the final question section,
Sure.
just list off in general, your favorite hidden gems.
Sure. I mean, the Game Boy Advance is my favorite console of all time. And I would say that Wario Land 4 is still so underrated as a game.
Wario? I didn't even know there was a Wario Land 4.
There sure is. It's one of the most beautifully designed pixel art you'll ever see. Some of the weirdest and most interesting digitized music you'll ever hear. I love Wario Land 4. It's probably my favorite platformer. There's a game coming out in November called Anton Blast, which is essentially a spiritual successor to Wario Land 4. I got to demo it and I backed it, and I love that game. Also on the Game Boy Advance, not enough people talk about Golden Sun. Either of the Golden Sun games are incredible. Some unique RPGs doing things that I haven't seen before or since. On the PS5, Gungrave Gore. I loved the Gungrave games on PlayStation 2. They are hidden gems on the PS2, but Gungrave Gore, the newest game on PS4, I think it might be just a PS4 game, but it's definitely on PS5. Love that game. It's schlocky, it's over the top, it's cheesy. I truly adore that one.
I played Gungrave on PS2.
Yeah. That's the first time I played
I knew
it.
that they were making a new one. I just lost track. I didn't know it had already come out. I'm watching footage of it right now.
Yeah. Like,
it looks dope.
Is it the best game ever? No. But if you want a perfect 7 out of 10 game that's a fun to play, can't recommend it enough. You know, I love the Devil May Cry games. Those are more popular, but like I think the prequel one, the third game, is really underrated as like kind of the perfect Devil May Cry game. And also I think that the remake, while misled, is not as bad as people make it out to be. It sucks when your favorite franchise reboots, but I think DMC is a perfectly fine video game.
I loved DMC.
Yeah.
We agree. People hated it.
Yeah. Like I was pissed that I didn't have my Dante anymore because I love that version of Dante. But also, I thought it was a perfectly fine game.
I actually liked Emo Dante in that, and Ninja Theory is one of my favorite developers, so I was excited that they were doing it, and I bought that game when it first came out, and I played it, and it was just this one of those times where me and the internet mobs disagree. I loved the game.
Yeah.
Am I going to claim it's the best Devil May Cry game? No. Actually, I like it more than 2.
Well, because 2 is awful.
And I like
bad.
it more than. I might like it more than I liked 4, but I might like it more than 4. And 5 is pretty awesome. Yeah. So I'm not going to say I like it more than. It's good.
Yeah, it's a good game.
I don't know. It's a good game.
Some hidden gems. So, like on the Xbox 360, the newest version is out, but which I think this is on Steam also. But the Warhammer 40K Space Marine, the first game, was a huge hidden gem on the Xbox 360. It was a Gears of War like. Nobody played it. I loved it. I can't believe we got a sequel to it this year. And
apparently it's awesome. Everyone's gushing about the sequel right now.
I want to replay. So I have the original on my Steam wish list, and I want to replay that before I play the new one. I don't need to, but I want to. I think now that we're getting a new one, the Mario and Luigi series, I mean, it was always popular, but I feel like that first one, Superstar Saga, a lot of folks overlooked. It wasn't until the DS era that they really became hugely popular. But I love the Mario and Luigi games. I think they're some of the best RPGs and the spiritual successors to Super Mario RPG. Well, I mean, the original Shantae on Game Boy Color. Shantae is a huge indie franchise now. But the original one on the Game Boy Color, while not a perfect game and has its flaws, I think is absolutely worth playing. There's versions of it on all modern platforms. Basically a Metroidvania without a map, which is challenging, but not impossible. But I love that whole franchise. I think they're all hidden gems, but I think the original one, the best one is Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. That's the best in the franchise. I think that's a 3DS game.
Which one is it? Because I have a couple of them, but there's so many I don't know which one's
Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. It was originally on 3DS. It's now been on everything else.
Curse.
They actually recently Limited Run did another release of it on the 3DS.
Oh, it's on Steam too.
Yes,
like now. Okay.
It's on all modern platforms. But I love that game. It is a blast to play. But that whole franchise is incredible. And then people just need to play more indie games. If I'm recommending stuff, 1,000 Times Resist, we mentioned earlier, The Messenger, Sea of Stars, Chained Echoes. So many indie games this year, every year.
Have you played Katana Zero?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If you haven't played that, anyone listening, just go play it.
Yeah.
I will. If you don't like it, DM me and I'll give you your money back. I think it's like there's a 99% chance you will at least like that game.
Yeah. Shovel Knight, of course, I shout from the rooftops constantly. Love Shovel Knight. Citizen Sleeper. If you have not played Citizen Sleeper, especially if you love narrative games, it's like dice rolls and dialogue.
I've never heard of it.
It's tabletop goodness. Citizen Sleeper is incredible. It's getting a sequel, I think, next year. Dave Jackson did an episode on it. If you want to go check out his episode of Tales from the Backlog on it.
It looks like a sim game?
Yeah, it's basically a sim game, but you just use dice rolls to place them to make things happen. It's brilliant. It's got some of the best writing, I think, in ever in a video game. I can't recommend it enough. It was my game of the year it came out. Like, it surpassed everything else.
There's a lot of YouTube videos that are like, this is one of the best games ever made. So you are not alone.
Nope. And we interviewed, if you want to tie it back, we interviewed the solo dev for it, Gareth Damian Martin. They came on our show to talk about that game, and it was a great episode and a great interview. So definitely go check that out too. But yeah, play Citizen Sleeper. I can't recommend it enough.
Awesome. Well, let's get into my rapid fire questions. This is my favorite part. I think it helps people really get to understand your taste in gaming. That's really the purpose. Especially when I bring on other podcasters that are in the gaming community, it's like, okay, let's get a taste of their gaming taste, and then they can decide if they want to go check out your podcast stuff. Now, I know some of these questions we already talked about, so if it's a repeat question, then the answer has to be different than what we've already talked about.
Happy to
you have to pick your number 2. So, what is your favorite antagonist in a video game?
Oh, that's
Who's
easy.
the best bad guy?
That's Majima from the Yakuza series. He is incredible. Goro Majima. He is one of the protagonists in Yakuza 0 and then becomes an antagonist, anti-hero throughout the rest of the franchise. They just announced that he's getting his own game where he thinks he's a pirate because he's lost his memory. Perfect. No notes. This is the RGG Studios, does all the Yakuza games. They are incredible. Both the most serious melodrama you'll ever see and the goofiest nonsense you will ever see all in one game. So yeah, Goro Majima is easily my answer.
Dave brought up in a future question the Yakuza. I don't want to spoil the question, but a moment in a Yakuza game.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him this question, and I'll ask you the same to see if you get a slightly different answer. That series I know is beloved. I see the reviews. I see the Steam reviews. I see the content. It's a very intimidating series to come into as a newcomer now with so many games, and all those games are very long from what I've told. If I were to enter, would you recommend starting with 0 and playing chronologically, or is there a path where you say, these few games, just watch some YouTube content, get the story, you can skip this game? Is there a more efficient path to get into that series? What would you recommend?
So there are 2 entry windows. So I started with 0 because, speaking of side quests, the incredible Derek Van Dyke did an episode on Yakuza 0, and after I edited it and listened to it, I went, I have to play this game. And started there, and then I just went chronologically because Kiwami 1 and 2 were out, which were the remakes of 1 and 2, so I just streamlined and played through everything, caught up to Like a Dragon, the one with Ichiban, and had to stop because I needed a break, and then played through it, and now I'm current. So there are 2 starting points. 0 is an excellent place to start because everything you do after that will just feed into the next game. And most of the games are between 20 and 30 hours, which is not short, but it's not long. It's not till we get to the later games and the RPGs where they become really long. But if you don't want to start at the beginning, my co-host, Jeff, who I mentioned earlier, started with Like a Dragon, Yakuza Like a Dragon, which was the game with the new protagonist, Ichiban. And it was when they changed from a beat-em-up to an RPG, turn-based RPG. You can absolutely start there. He started there, and he loved it. He loved the sequel, Infinite Wealth, and he's excited to play all the new games as they come and will eventually go back. So, if you want to go through the long haul, I did it over several years. It is absolutely rewarding, some of the best storytelling in video games ever. However, if that's too large of a commitment, or you just want to jump through stuff, you can start with Yakuza Like a Dragon, which I believe is the 7th game, and then go from there and just play the RPGs and the spin-offs. You can go either way and you'd be fine. But for me, my recommendation is starting from the beginning with 0, only because I think the narrative hits so much harder. Kiryu is the protagonist of most of the games. Kazuma Kiryu is one of my favorite video game characters because I went on that journey with him from the very first game, 0, all the way through the modern story. I think it's very rewarding. You have to make the time for it. That's the only part.
Yeah.
That's harder.
They're 20 to 30 hours if you just mainline the story, or is that completion?
Yeah. I mean, the games later on get a little beefier, but I think for the most part, all of the beat 'em up games are like at the most, I think 30, 35 hours. And you don't, but the problem with these games, you say if you mainline the story, the melodrama is great, but the sub-stories and side stories are often weird, sitcom-y, bizarre situational stuff that are so funny and so well written that I wouldn't want you to miss that. So I think if you were going to play them, I would look at the longer side, like the middle time, the main story plus side, not completionist time, and take that one as gospel, because I think it's worth seeing the side content. The mini games are great too. Like, it's one of those franchises that are very rich in everything. It's not like you mentioned you're playing Final Fantasy 16, a game that I actually genuinely love. It's become one of my favorite Final Fantasies. But the side quests in that game are awful and pointless.
That's the worst. You could get rid of them.
They're useless.
They would be a better game.
The main story is, I think, phenomenal, but the side missions are pointless. The Yakuza has the opposite problem. The Like a Dragon games, almost every side mission is worth doing and a blast, and usually really fun or funny or touching. So yeah, I can't recommend the franchise enough. I really think if you want to play one game and feel satisfied, start with 0, because you could play that game and finish it and go, okay, I'm done, and you played one of the best games in the franchise. But if you want to see it through, you can also start there and see it through.
And it sounds like you see your antagonist become the antaginist in 0, right?
You get to see Yakuza 0. You play as both Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima, and you find out how they become these characters who debuted in the original Yakuza that came out on PlayStation 2. Like, this is the thing that sets them up to become those legendary characters.
All right, now the favorite protagonist that's not Kiryu from Yakuza.
Favorite protagonist? Oh, God, this one's tough. I mean, there's so many. It's funny. Side character would be so much easier. I have like 4 favorite side characters that pop into my head, but like protagonist of a game, I really like Cloud. It's cheesy, but like I really like Cloud as a character. Like, he's not my favorite character in 7. That'll always be the very handsome Vincent Valentine. But like, Goth, Metal Claw, what's not to love? But like, I really like Cloud as a protagonist. It's funny. Most of my favorite characters in games as I get older are like the side characters. Besides Kiryu, who is definitely my favorite, it would have to be, I think, Cloud. I really love his story. It's easy to dog on him because he's, a typical kind of emo boy, but like the whole Mako poisoning, hallucinations, finding out his past, finding out what his story really is. Like, I love all of that. I think he's a great protagonist, and I love his character.
Who's your favorite supporting character, side character?
Knuckles from the Sonic franchise. Knuckles for life. I love that character. I loved him since he debuted in 3. I loved his stupid TV show that wasn't great. I love him in the new movies. Idris Elba absolutely kills it as Knuckles. Easily, I think my favorite side characters, for sure, Knuckles.
Favorite soundtrack besides Chrono Trigger?
Sea of Stars. I think it has, and I mean, the lineage.
That's
basically similar lineage.
It's so good.
But Sea of Stars, the fact that there are 3 soundtracks, night, day, and then like the overture. Like, yeah, I love that soundtrack so much. Sea of Stars, since Shovel Knight, no other indie game have I loved more than Sea of Stars. Which I know it's a divisive game. Not everybody loved it, but I absolutely. It's people who loved Chrono Trigger making their Chrono Trigger. There was no way I was not going to love it because Chrono Trigger is my favorite game.
I do have one major complaint about the soundtrack, though.
What's that?
Major complaint. The problem is that each area and each zone, day and night, the songs were so good.
Yeah.
And I was playing this game on stream, and I had a lot of people just luckily come. I think the game was getting hyped. I played it when it came out, so people were coming in and hanging out, and I would be vibing, like moving around, like, oh my god! And then the battle starts, and the battle music. I'm not gonna say it's bad.
It's not as good as the stage music, though.
But it would kill the vibe.
Yeah.
And I had this, and it's not just Sea of Stars, but I had this aha moment. I'm like, there is an inherent design flaw in JRPG design that we have just inherited.
Yeah. Because
it's been normal. Is you don't need battle music.
No.
The battle music should be the same music as the area you're in.
Yeah. I think boss battle music makes sense for those handful of moments, but like,
Yes.
I mean, I
It
love
should
the
be
Chrono
for
Trigger.
bosses.
I love the Chrono Trigger battle
Bosses
music,
should
but
have
like,
their own battle music.
yeah,
And then if you develop this awesome, if I'm in like the water cave and I'm swimming in delay and reverb and I'm vibing, and then all of a sudden you just take me out and throw this battle music that doesn't fit the vibe. You know, some composer spent all this time building an audio vibe to this area, and
Yeah.
you got me. You locked me in. I'm there. I got chills. You did it, and then you pull me out of the experience with this battle music.
Yeah.
What I've been thinking is like they need to make the slightly heavier version, or maybe more drums, that only triggers in battle. So it's still the same song.
yeah,
But maybe the drums come in a little bit heavier, and maybe there's a new lead or something.
Yeah.
So you never leave the area
yeah,
audio wise.
yeah.
Because I would be in Sea of Stars like, oh my God, like on stream, like this music is so and then the battle hits and I would be mad. Like, why? I was into that song. Why did you do that to me?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is like, so I think about Chrono Trigger, like also the battle music is great, but like the music in the stages is better. But then you have a game like Super Mario RPG where the battle music is dope and you cut away to a separate screen. So like it makes sense,
Yes.
right? So like I think we inherited it from this era of like, you know, Chrono Trigger, you go into battle on the screen. You don't go elsewhere. But in the PlayStation era, we transport to a different screen. And so having the separate music kind of made sense because you were transitioning to another location. And then we kind of adopted that style of music transition when we went to modern RPGs. But I agree. I mean, I really like the Sea of Stars battle music, but you're right. The vibes on those, like the stage themes are so good. The different areas, all incredible.
So good.
Have you played The Messenger?
Yes.
So like
I didn't beat it.
The first time you get to an area that's all, because it's all in the same world, the first time you get to Autumn Hills and it's the same music, but it's built out and more vibrant, freaking lost my mind. I was so excited.
Yeah, I was really excited for Sea of Stars because I saw an interview that he's been planning all these games that exist in the same universe since he was in high school.
Yeah, and
big
that
master
he made
plan.
Messenger because it was cheaper and faster, and that was their
Yes.
game to fund Sea of Stars. They always wanted to make Sea of Stars. And Messenger has become a huge hit. It was a huge hit, but they made that game literally to fund Sea of Stars, which I think is incredible.
Yes, and I know not everyone loved it, but I thought Sea of Stars was the spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger
too.
we've always wanted.
Same.
Is it as good as Chrono Trigger? I don't know. You could I loved it.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm not going to compare the two. I'm just glad that we got it.
Me too. Absolutely. I'm excited for the DLC that's coming next year.
Freaking our boy, the cooker boy, Gar, whatever his
Garl.
name is.
He's the best boy. Garl's the best boy.
He's the best boy, dude.
He's the best
He's
boy.
the best boy.
Yeah.
He's my man.
Hands down.
This might be the same game, maybe. What moment in gaming has made you the most emotional, elicited the strongest emotional response?
Oh, this is easy, and it's not the same game. So the game that elicited the strongest response is there's a game called Like a Dragon Gaiden, the Man Who Erased His Name. It's about Kiryu between two of the games. And there is a scene at the end of the game that I will not spoil that
This is the same thing Dave said.
Yeah.
The same moment.
So we were on a podcast together on his show to talk about this game. That moment, like I've never heard a voice performance like this. And again, I've played all of these games since the first game with this character. Then I got to this moment and the character's crying, you're crying. I was ugly crying in a way that I don't think I've cried since I grieved someone. Like it was brutal. It wrecked me. But it was so satisfying and cathartic to experience that along with this character, this moment that I still don't want to spoil. And Dave's absolutely right. It is the most I've ever been affected emotionally by a game. I would have had a myriad of answers before this game, but this game so clear in a way blew all of those other games out of the park. Like I think the most I've ever been confused and upset is at the beginning of Mass Effect 2, which I also won't spoil just because I won't. But like,
yeah,
that moment, I was like, you can't do that. This is a video game. And I lost my mind. And that would have been my answer until Gaiden. Gaiden just kind of blew me away with how, like, it ties the whole story together. I was kind of lackluster on the story till that moment. So yeah, absolutely the hardest I've ever cried and the most that I've ever been emotional was at the end of Like a Dragon Gaiden, the Man Who Erased His Name.
That is that recommendation by Dave was why I started considering, like, do I want to just start with 0? And because he said if you want that moment to hit,
You have to
gotta
play from the
through all
beginning.
games.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and now you're the second person. So it's basically like, am I willing to put in, a few hundred hours to have that moment hit? I probably will do it because I'm just, it sounds as if it's a moment in gaming history that if you've got to experience if you're into games. Like there's certain games that I don't think are great.
Yeah.
But they're such a big part of gaming history. As a gaming enthusiast, I'm going to go play it just because I have to.
I will say this about the Yakuza Like a Dragon franchise. There is no other game with the hit rate that they have. They have never made a bad game. They have made games that are better than others. But and I've said this on every time I've talked about these games, every game is good to great. Most of them are great. And that's why I recommend them. Because I think they're worth experiencing. Also, that said, a lot of them have summaries and wrap-ups. I think you could space them out over time and still get that appreciation. I don't think you need to play them back to back to back to back to really feel it. That's basically what I did, and I think that enhances it for sure, jumping from one game to the next. But you don't have to. I think you could even space out a couple a year until you catch up to them. I mean, they release so many games a year that it'll be a while before you catch up if you do that. But I think it still hits just as hard, but I agree with Dave. I think you need to experience the entire franchise. But again, it's become one of my favorite video game franchises because they have yet to make a bad game. And I literally cannot say that about any other game franchise I've ever played. Every other video game franchise has a game that I don't like that I would consider to be a bad game. Whether it's bad because I don't like it or bad because it's just made poorly is irrelevant. But this franchise is just no misses and it's incredible.
What is the most disappointed you've been in a game?
Oh.
Biggest letdown, maybe.
Biggest letdown. I mean, it's got to be Sonic 06, right? I'm a giant Sonic fan, and that game was just a broken mess. Truthfully, the narrative, as weird as it was not that bad. Sonic narratives are always pretty weird, but it was just unplayable. I remember I was so excited. There was a Sonic game coming out on the Xbox 360, the most powerful console I owned to that point. I didn't really have a good gaming PC at that time. I was so excited to get a Sonic game on a modern platform. This is supposed to be essentially Sonic Adventure 3. I was so disappointed by that game. Could never finish it, never got through it. There's someone working on a PC mod that's supposed to fix all the problems that's been in process for ages. But if that ever comes out, I'll definitely play it. But yeah, I think Sonic 06 is easily my biggest disappointment.
What is the biggest pleasant surprise? Something you didn't expect to be good, but ended up being awesome and you didn't expect it?
Animal Well. I had no interest in Animal Well when it was announced. When I saw it, I never got hands on it, but I kept seeing it at PAX and people talking about Billy Basso and that it was produced, by Donkey, Video Game Donkey. And I saw this game and I was just like, this is a nothing game. I'm not interested in this. It looks, even though it was a Metroidvania, which I don't know that I knew at the time, it was a nothing game. And then it came out free on PS Plus, basically free. I'm paying for PS Plus, so I don't have to pay for the game. And I downloaded it. I'm like, a bunch of people are talking about it. I might as well try it. Next thing I knew, I lost 4 hours to the game that night. And I played it obsessively until I finished it. And I saw credits. I never got all the stuff that everyone else has gotten. But I was so pleasantly surprised and it ended up being one of my favorites of this year. And I've never, I won't say never. I haven't recently gone from less than zero on a game to it becoming a favorite. That just doesn't happen that much anymore. And so I love when that happens.
If Jeff Bezos came along and said, all right, Matt, I'm feeling charitable. Here's $10 billion. Make whatever game you want, whatever studio you want, whatever producer you want, whatever composer you want. Who would you hire and what would you make?
I would probably make some kind of rhythm game RPG. There's stuff that has existed and will exist, I'm sure. But I would love to make a rhythm game mashed up with an turn-based RPG. Timed hits are kind of like a layup for that. I mean, composers, it would be tough. I would probably hire Grant Kirkhope just because I love his music so much. Game director, I would hire Nomura to game direct and write the story because I love Kingdom Hearts and the wackier the game, the better. And then if I could pick a fictional studio to make it, I would probably give it to Sabotage. Considering what they did with Sea of Stars, I would probably give it to Sabotage Studios to make. And if I was going to give it to a larger publisher, it would be the folks who Tango Gameworks, who recently were reformed sort of in a good way. I mean, people who make PUBG bought them specifically to reassemble them so they could make a Hi-Fi Rush 2, which I'm grateful for because I love the first one. So I would also give it to possibly Tango Gameworks because I loved Hi-Fi Rush. I think it's one of the best games ever made.
Hi-Fi Rush, I don't understand how it didn't do better. When I got it, I was like, this on launch day it's optimized perfectly. There's no bugs.
Yeah.
It runs like a wet dream. It is freaking the way that like everything is in sync with the music.
Oh, so
and
perfect.
Even down to like the step, every tiny detail is in sync with the music, but it doesn't feel forced.
No.
It feels natural.
Yeah, totally.
It's so good.
So good. I love that game. I'm so excited we're going to get a sequel. It's in my top 10 games of all time. It skyrocketed to the top. Man, this whole episode didn't have a reason to talk about Control or the Remedyverse, and I'm obsessed with that too.
Control is in my top 10, 5
absolutely.
games of all time. The Remedyverse is my favorite connected universe.
Me too.
It's my favorite.
Me too. And like, talk about soundtracks. The Poets of the Fall as the old gods of Asgard. Their music just rips. And like that moment in Alan Wake 2 to this day is probably...
We sing that chapter.
Oh my God.
Go through the
probably one of the coolest things in a video game ever.
Come on in and listen, lost words you've been missing. Now the fire you're bearing, the eye of the darkness, your light.
It's a tie between that and the Ashtray Maze, without a doubt. Like, coolest thing in a video game ever.
I was thinking of playing through Alan Wake 2, like, are they going to have the Ashtray Maze moment? Like,
Yeah,
how
same.
Are they going to iterate? Because the Ashtray Maze blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's basically a musical, but you're playing Inception, the video game, but it's a musical. And then when We Sing started, that chapter, because it didn't have the same Inception, like, moving geometry at first, the first, like, 5-10 minutes into that section, I was thinking like, okay, this is the Ashtray Maze of Alan Wake 2. It's not quite as epic, but it's still cool. But the more I played it, and then the more like campy some of the dance, and like I realized it's you can't do what they did in Control in Alan Wake 2 because Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror.
Right.
It's much more. It's hard. I don't want to say grounded because the whole thing is surreal, but it's grounded in a sense that Control is not grounded. By the time I finished that section, I thought, this might be better than Ashtray Maze, even though it's different.
Yeah.
But it's still, I don't know. I love both of those.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the concert in the first Alan Wake, right? Like that's that moment in that game. It's not on the same level, but like, yeah.
Yes.
I still haven't played Quantum Break. I bought it earlier this year, so I'm going to play it finally this year. The Max Payne games have those moments too. Like every Remedy game has that moment. And so I'm excited to see what that moment is in Quantum Break.
That's true. I didn't think about it, but in Max Payne, remember the dream
The dreams, where you're walking.
You walk along the
and the baby's
blood
crying.
And there's a baby. Yeah.
So I love we could do a whole other podcast on the Remedyverse.
I think I just saw news that some TV or publishing company is going to fund 50% of Control 2
Annapurna
in exchange for the movie rights.
And Annapurna is doing it, and they're going to be making like supplementary material, TV, movies, that kind of stuff for it. So I can't wait for Control 2. There's never been a more anticipated game probably since Mass Effect 2 for Control 2. I replayed Control last year in anticipation of Alan Wake 2 and then played the Alan Wake remaster, and like I devoured Control again. I played it on the PS5. I had played it the first time on my PS4 and it chugged. Like
it's a
awful
game,
but I still loved it. And so then when I played on PS5, I was just blown away by it, and like played all the DLC because I don't think I'd played the Foundation back then. Control, easily one of the best.
Did you played AWE?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I played the day it came out, but I think Foundation came out after it because it was like the last DLC. I've played all of the DLC. I've played all the DLC for Alan Wake 2 that's come out so far. I'm excited for the Lake House later this year. Love that universe.
Last but not least, if you could pick one game that if someone hasn't played, that even if it's one you've already mentioned, one game that, hey, trust me, just play this game no matter who you are, whether you're a gamer or not. If you haven't played this game, what would it be?
So it's funny, it won't be a game I've mentioned before, but we did a whole episode on the podcast about games that you recommend that you're hesitant to spoil. Like you want to recommend a game, but you want to just tell people to play it without any info. Like 1,000 Times Resist is one of them. But my game for this question always is Before Your Eyes. Play Before Your Eyes.
Never heard of it.
It's on PC. It requires a webcam. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and it is one of the best video game experiences I have ever had. Talk about a game, a runner-up for most emotional I've ever been. Play Before Your Eyes. It doesn't take long. It's one of the best video games I've ever played.
I've never heard of this.
I don't know how. You're in the circles of folks I know who have played it. That's astonishing. But yeah, definitely play it. And it'll take you no time.
Especially games that are like this, that are short. I'm like, okay, sweet, I can play that. Sometimes someone will recommend a game that's like the Yakuza.
Yeah.
Like, you got to play it to get to this moment. But sorry, you got to invest like 400 hours for this moment to hit. It's like, ooh.
Yeah. There are tons of RPGs I'd recommend and other stuff, but like I like recommending short games because then you can just dive in. Night in the Woods is another one, a big one, like because that's like 4 or 5 hours long, maybe 6 hours long. But yeah, Before Your Eyes, everyone go play it. Don't look up anything about it, just play it. It's like $15, I think.
Anything else you want to say before we wrap this bitch up?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I can piss off the capital G gamers. Accessibility tools are okay. It's not cheating. You should play a game how you play a game. The Souls games are okay, but they're not great. That's not true. I loved Elden Ring. I loved Elden Ring, but like I pushed back against Souls games for a long time. If you haven't played anything on the Game Boy Advance, get a Game Boy Advance emulator and play literally any game. You will thank me. It's the best handheld console and, dare I say, video game console ever made.
I agree with you on the accessibility. I have gotten in many arguments, specifically with my brother, who gets angry when people are offered options to make games easier.
You don't have to use them if you want it to be hard. It's for people that aren't you.
He's like, his counter argument is, but I will use them if it's there. If I'm forced to get good, I'll get good. But if you give me an easy out, I'll use the easy out. And I'm like, well, that's a self-control problem.
Yeah.
That's a discipline problem.
That's your weak will. That's not everybody else's problem.
Yeah. And I'm playing 16 right now. And I love hard games. And I've played all the Souls games. The only one I haven't beat is Sekiro. In the middle of the Elden Ring DLC, working my way through it. And sometimes I'm not in the mood for that type of grind to get good grind.
Yep.
And when I was playing through, I started playing 16 when it came out on PS5. I realized I liked it so much and I couldn't handle the frame rate and the motion blur and the visuals. I'm like, I'm going to wait till this comes out on PC and I can have the proper experience.
Yep.
It came out recently. I started playing it. I want to do a beauty of video. I'm retrospective, so I'm recording everything, every cutscene. I have 2 terabytes of footage already and I'm almost done with the game. But I also know that this is going to take me a long time to do it. So I am playing that game with the accessory that helps you do combos easier and the dodge one. Yeah. And I'm still like 60 hours into this game. Yeah. I would have not been able to get through this project and get all this footage. And one of the things is I can detach the camera and get some of these epic shots and not die because I know my character is going to automatically dodge. Yeah. And I'm still dying in boss fights, but I can like get this really cool footage that I would not be able to get otherwise. Right. And so, 16 is one of those games I decided, this one, I'm not going to get good. I'm going to play it on easy mode. And to be honest, I think I'm having more fun. Yeah. I mean, that's because I don't have to do the grindy Dark Souls, play this boss 50 times. I can beat it, get cool footage. And I think I'm over the masochist phase. I've been doing that for a while. It's been really enjoyable to take the accessibility options that they put in that game and just casually go through and enjoy the game. Yeah.
I mean, I love a challenge, but like the way I got through the Yakuza franchise is I put every game on easy and I just blazed through the combat so I could see the awesome story and side missions, and it made it go much faster.
And it's too much time. Yeah. Think about how much more time it would have taken if you played it on hard.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I agree with you. Accessibility is not cheating. In fact, if you're one of those masochists, every once in a while, you know what? Play a game on easy and just enjoy the game. You might realize that you don't always have to be a masochist, and it's not always about getting good. It can be about enjoying the art that was made for you.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't agree more.
Agreed. Check Matt, AKA Stormageddon, out. All the applicable links shall be in the podcast description to both his podcasts. I'm sure you have a link tree for both of them, right?
Yes.
I'll just put the 2 link trees in
so
there.
I have a link tree for me and everything there. So I'll just give you the one link tree and everything's in there.
And then it was episode 138.
Yes.
Was the one you recommended,
Yes.
correct? So remember that. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Spread the good news of the gaming gospel. You shall be blessed. I say these things in the name of me, Mother, the Father, the Coach, the Son, and Carmack, the Holy Ghost. Amen. And enjoy Stormageddon. Bye.
Bye.